Ah,
Hey, Father.
hi, Father.
Hello, hello.
Thought we were.
Heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of Truth, present in all places, including all things, come and dwell in us, come to stand, save our souls, so gracious Lord. And through the
Amen.
prayers of St. Romanos the Melodist, enlighten our mouths to speak glory to God.
Amen.
All right, so as you notice, as you're reading through Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives, it's kind of, separated by a bunch of maxims. So it's not
Yeah.
like there's like one overarching story that goes through. It's a bunch of thoughts, little vignettes. And so what I'd like us to do with first thoughts and then with our families, I'd like, starting first with thoughts, for each person to go through and say what was their favorite spot. If you can't remember the exact quotation, that's fine, but maybe just give your favorite spot, or as can be, something that you had a problem with. Somebody say, you know what, I don't know what this means, or I have a problem with what Elder Thaddeus is saying here.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Steve, you want to start us off?
Well, there was one. I'm trying to find it now. That I thought was a little bit. I mean, I like what he's saying, but I thought it was a little bit contradictory. Let me just find it here. Okay, there it is. Oh, I got to go two places. Okay, no. Okay. He
Okay.
says,
I found
if
mine.
God would allow us to do everything the way
Well,
we
that
desire
was my favorite one too.
and when we desire, the world would certainly result in catastrophe.
That's number 5 in Our Thoughts.
However, I think it's a little bit contradictory because he says, but I say, but our thoughts determine our lives. Isn't that contradictory?
Well, here's where it comes from, in the sense that when he's talking about if God just allowed our thoughts to just kind of dictate everything, he's talking about our passions. So in other words, and this is where he says in another place that we're basically like perfect antennae, that we're getting all kinds of different signals. And we have the capability of having direct communication, direct line with God, to be able to achieve theosis, to achieve deification, and yet we don't, because we're being constantly bombarded with passion. So when he's saying our world would be absolute chaos if that happened, if God allowed us to basically do whatever our thoughts plan, this is where he's talking about. So the idea of our thoughts determine our lives is really getting to the heart of, if we allow these kind of thoughts to dictate where we go, it'll be chaos, it'll be misery, it'll be absolute sadness. But if we allow our thoughts to remain on God and his plan for us and on his kingdom, then everything will have its right order. So when he's talking about our thoughts, we have to be careful to understand that there's two different thoughts that he's always kind of looking at it diametrically. The thoughts which are our passions, and our thoughts which are leading unto God.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, Panayota, I guess you got to find a new one since.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there were a few. I also liked under number 9, thought number 9, which is, something I struggle with. Why does the Lord command us to love our enemies and to pray for them? It's towards the further into number 9. Not for their sake, but for ours. For as long as we bear grudges, as long as we dwell on how someone offended us, we will have no peace.
So this is the most powerful one of them all, in my opinion, because the reality is that, and we're going to get into deeper into this, but the consequence is that our thoughts don't just stay within our minds; they have the ability to impact other people. And so this idea of, oh well, my thoughts on my enemy, what does that matter? Well, the reality is that even if we are harboring grudges in ourselves, we are actually causing physical harm to that person. This will be made.
Do you believe that, Father? Do you believe that?
I do believe that. I've seen that.
Oh.
That we seem to think we don't have any kind of power, but we are divine beings, created in the image and likeness of God. We have the capability of doing things that God allows us to do. This is a huge responsibility. And we, of course, have seen the results of this kind of negativity in the lives of people that are in darkness, and just how their very thoughts can lead to darker things still, and how problems. it is not the outer battle that really matters. It's the inner battle. When
Yeah.
we talk about people and we have thoughts about people. If I condemn somebody in my heart, that is worse, way worse, because I am actually causing harm to that person's soul, to that person's spirit. I have that capability. I have that power. And especially for me as a priest, it's worse. Because as a priest, I'm imbued with divine powers by virtue of my ordination. So my thoughts have more impact than other people's thoughts. And as a result, of course, this is one of the reasons why they say that the road to hell is paved with the skulls of dead priests and the lampposts are the bishops.
Oh, wow.
So a priest has to be very, very careful with his thoughts. When we're looking further in, we'll get to that a little bit when we're talking about family, about the idea about how the head of the household has to be calm, has to be smiling, has to be loving
Right.
constantly. That is the role of the priest in the community, is that if he's not loving and kind and establishing that, then it's causing anxiety to everyone inside, untold number of people, because any priest is going to have that ability.
Wow. And does that include like physical harm?
It can.
Wow.
How do we protect ourselves from that when other people are having these thoughts about our souls or just physically?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Good
basically,
question.
what this kind of goes down to, and especially as we are on the eve of the feast of Saints Cyprianos and Justina, what a lot of times in Greek culture you'll hear this "me matise."
Yeah.
They gave me the mati, and that comes from this. So mati, the evil eye, is
Yeah.
essentially when we are thinking deeply about some another person. And if you read the prayer that the priest reads over somebody, it says whether it was over bravery or beauty or anything, but basically any like super thought that you're having on somebody can cause this, where you're basically sending evil spirits at somebody because you're thinking about them constantly. So your thoughts are having an effect. They're going at somebody. And so if we have a negative thought towards them, especially if we're really like, that's all I can think about is negativity, I'm causing harm to that person. And so, Maria Canal, to your point of what can you do to defend yourself against that? Well, if we look to the life of Saint Justina, everything that Cyprianos tried to do to her, sending demon after demon after demon, did it have any effect on her?
No,
No. Why?
because she prayed.
She was a prayerful being. If you are a prayerful being, if you are protected by the Holy Spirit, then no demon, no harm will come to you. And in essence, what that basically means is that if somebody's having negative thoughts against you, if you are positive, you are full of the Holy Spirit and the light of God, all it's doing is bouncing back and causing harm to that person. And you as a person that is full of light has no effect on you. And you, on the other hand, are able to pray for that person, to help mollify that person, help that person, and by God's grace, bring them back into a sense of peace. So if you are prayerful, you can't get the mati. If you are getting the mati, what is it really saying? It's saying, well, then I'm not as prayerful as I should be.
Wow.
And then with that, because I know we're not, I mean, we don't like wear the mati because that's not
Yeah.
with faith, but we talk about, somebody gave them the mati. So
Yeah.
where do we draw the line of where it's part of our religion and not?
Versus
So-
superstition. Yeah.
So black magic and curses are real. They do exist. We've known that they've existed for thousands of years. Voodoo, Haitian magic, all that stuff, it's real. There are curses all over the place. The problem is, well, not the problem, the benefit is that as Orthodox Christians by and large, or faithful Christians in general, is that if you are a faithful Christian, most of the time those curses amount to nothing. So the reality is, American, the line that is drawn is, yes, you believe that these things have power, these things can happen, but you also believe in the Holy Spirit and you believe in the sacraments of the church. So if you feel that you are under the person so beautiful, oh my gosh, so beautiful. I wish I was beautiful like that person. Oh my goodness. Or that person has a nice house. I really like that person's house. My goodness, I wish my house looked like that person's house. Oh, that car is so nice. I wish I had a car like that. Oh my goodness. What a wonderful car. And so on and so on and so on. So this is where Elder Thaddeus is correct. Our thoughts determine our lives, because if we allow those thoughts that come at us, to just dominate us, they will dominate us. And so that's why we have to, as he said, put them away. If we're leading a good spiritual life, most of those thoughts will hit us and it's like Teflon, bounce off.
Or what
They
if
have no effect on you because you're just like, nope.
yeah. So what if we realize within ourselves, like, oh, I'm jealous of this, but we don't want to harm anybody, either, spiritually or physically. How do we stop ourselves from harming somebody?
So the way you stop yourself from harming someone, and you just said it, Marie Canella, is that if we recognize within ourselves the fault, and Elder Thaddeus says it, that 90 times out of 100, and the letter that Steve read from the prisoner pen pal is like, it's us. We're the problem. And so when we self-correct, and by self-correct, turning ourselves to God, he protects. He fixes what's inside of us, and then he protects everyone around us. So by trying to fix ourselves, righting the ship, as it were, within our own souls, within our own spirit, it helps everyone else. This is why there's this concept of like spiritual osmosis, because if you're saintly, everyone around you becomes saintly. And we're going to get to that in a bit with the idea of the parenthood, but it's like if even one person is spiritual and peaceful in a household, it will affect and save everyone in that household.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this concept of that if I can figure out a way to save myself, then I can save other people. So every single time somebody keeps coming to him and to Elder Thaddeus and saying, help me save this person, help me save this person, like, okay, fix yourself. You're the problem. And then once that happens, invariably, the help happens. So we're going to stick on you, Maria Canella, for a moment and ask you what your favorite or problematic vignette was from the thoughts portion of this week's reading.
I didn't start writing my notes down until the family portion, so I have a couple for the family portion. But I think it was just basically all the questions that I've asked of how do you protect yourself from like somebody's bad thoughts at you, because you don't necessarily know if they're coming.
That's the thing. You don't know who's projecting this toward you, and that it's really unsettling. I'm going to have a sleepless night tonight.
but Panayota, you don't need to, because you are a prayerful being. I know you. And so as a prayerful being, 99 times out of 100, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
It bounces off you because you're prayerful and your thoughts are thinking towards other people and looking to help other people. It's only when we allow those thoughts to become this way, or when we allow ourselves to sink into degradation. But when we are prayerful beings, when we are participating in the life of the church fully, meaning the church at home and the church at church, then we're immune. So
thanks, Father.
Don't be afraid of the reality of this. Is reality, though. This is what's going on around you, and which should encourage us to make sure that we maintain our level of spirituality, because but for the shield of God, that's all coming at us.
Wow. Well, and then the other side of it is to really be vigilant about when you said, oh, what a nice house, I wish I had that. There's like a fine line between admiring something and coveting something, like
Correct.
sometimes I feel that way, but I don't mean it in a negative way, but
Let me ask you this, because oftentimes people get confused about the two. When a thought hits you and says, what a nice house, does it stop there? In other words, if all you thought was what a nice house and you moved on and you're going on with other thoughts, then that's just a thought. It could be a harmless thought. Or it could be a thought, which is what I like to call the devil's shotgun, where he's shooting lots of different thoughts at you, hoping one of them's going to stick. And then you start to say, okay, wow, that was a nice house. And then that's all you can think about. And when it becomes all you can think about, then it becomes problematic. Then it starts to fall into the sin of coveting. And that's where the devil's hoping to lead you down. But when it's just a thought, boom, that was a nice house. I appreciate that it was a nice house. That's not letting it take root inside of your soul. That's a statement of fact. That's observing something. But that is not weighing on you. It's when it becomes a thought that recurs,
More
something
obsessive.
going back to.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but Father, you say that, if you're a prayerful person, you you become immune to these types of things. But, you know, I mean, I know for myself, I might be a prayerful person, but at the same time, I also feel those types of things happening. So I'm not immune. So
Let me rephrase that. When I say immune, I'm not saying you're immune to attacks. I mean that you're immune to the, how do I put this? The more drastic inferences of these attacks. So in other words, the devil's still going to try to attack you. He's not going to let up. He's going to continuously go after you one way or another. He finds one door closed, he's going to go for a window. He's constantly peering, trying to find your weaknesses, trying to find the thought that is going to get you into trouble. That's continuous. He's hoping to tear down your armor. When I say you're immune, I mean the effects of curses, the effects of dark magic, or these sort of things that are the more insidious byproducts of the harm that I'm talking about. The devil's still trying to attack you. He's still trying to tear you down. It's just that he's not able to cause harm to you because you are prayerful. It doesn't mean he's not letting up. I mean, we're going to be in spiritual warfare to the day we die.
Yeah.
But it does mean that the grace of God is protecting you from the ill effects of other people's thoughts to a large degree.
Wow.
Had two things, right? I have one here before we say what we liked.
Okay.
The one thing was that reminded me when you say you could harm someone is that example I said last time about the person who got the speeding ticket, who cursed the police officer, and then just not a mile down the road, the police officer gets in an accident, and he asked the priest, well, did I cause that? And the priest said, well, probably.
Maybe you did. Yeah.
Because
Wow.
those were his thoughts that literally, and you think, oh my gosh. And then Dr. Tobias here had something we found in our evening, in our prayers.
Well, you started out by saying how hard it was praying for your enemies and all that. And then all of a sudden it just struck me that in your morning prayers, save, O Lord, and have mercy upon those who envy and affront me and do me mischief, and do not let them perish through me, a sinner.
Yep. And these prayers are not new. They're not like, a novel, like, oh, what a wonderful idea. No, this is the crux of it. And this is what makes Christianity different.
Yes.
This is what makes Christ different, is that he's asking us to pray for our enemies. And that's why this past Sunday, you heard from the gospel, to love your enemy. To love the person that loves you, what is that?
Yeah. Nothing.
Sinners do that.
Yeah.
But to genuinely love the person that is willing you harm, that's a different thing entirely. But we see, as Steve pointed out from the very beginning, that when he's quoting Elder Thaddeus, like, we do that not just to help that person, but it helps us. All right. Any other thoughts or comments about the first session before we go into section 2? Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say what my favorite part was.
I'll go for it.
Yeah. Yes.
My turn. I like number 2.
Oh, okay.
Because as you read the whole thing and you get down on the second page on 64 to where he talks about the starting point is always wrong. And that is so true because, we're always trying to fix things. And he says, that we need to start with ourselves and, look to ourselves first before, and then everything will sort of fix itself. And, and that's so true. I mean, because you always see that everywhere, that everybody's trying to fix everything around them, but not
themselves.
Yeah. As if and you can't change certain things, and you fuss and it upsets you when you realize, well, wait a minute, I should be starting with me.
Yeah.
So that was really, struck a chord there.
Yeah. Well, we tend to feel like I'm okay. It's the other person that needs
and I need
correction.
to change them.
Yeah. Right.
Thoughts,
Right.
when we're able to break down that idea, that self-righteous notion, because everyone thinks that they are the hero in their own story. Everyone thinks that the protagonist. And as such, we encounter ourselves as this self-righteous character that, well, the world is wrong and I'm right. And the reality is that nobody's right. We're all wrong. We're all dealing with issues. And the reality is that in order to fix the issues, we have to fix ourselves first. Then we can save other people. The way I like to enlighten it too is the idea of, you see someone drowning, but you're not an expert swimmer. You want to go save that person, but what's going to happen if you try to swim out and save that person?
You both drown.
You both drown. Even if you're an expert swimmer, you're both going to drown. The only way to save that person is with a life preserver. And that life preserver is Christ. There's no other way. Dr. Tobias, did you have a verse that you wanted to focus on?
No, basically what Angela just said, and then I was, well, when he got into the family, that was so true. I mean, he wrote these things so many years ago, but you see in today's society, I mean, everything that he said, today's society turns it upside down and thinks just the opposite of what he is telling us to do.
Yeah.
To me, you almost feel like you need to read that chapter on, family, and then St. Paisios' chapter on parenting, from Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives. Like every couple of months to just recenter yourself and remind yourself, like, wait a second, this is where it's supposed to be. So why don't we go and start there with you, since we're segueing into that. Why don't we go ahead to you, Dad, and find your favorite spot from the family section and go from there.
Well, let's see. I was just kind of generalizing.
You need to give us our questions first,
Yeah.
and then we'll know if we're reading. Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, so this is our first, four-way. I mean, yes, I can reflect on each of these as the priest, but it's much more fun to have you all give your insight. So going forward with your readings, maybe select 2 or 3 that really, really speak to you. Maybe put a little note next to it to say, okay, this is what I'm going to share with the rest of the class next time, so that we can have good reflections.
Well, here's the thing. It's just amazing how true everything is. I mean, when you
Yeah.
look at it. I mean,
Yeah, like correcting your child with love in a loving way, not in anger and wrath, but to really do it with love.
Yes.
and that the first, and that it's so true, because the first 5 years, and you see this in grocery
Oh,
stores,
yeah.
that
Yeah.
the first 5 years are so important. And sometimes you see children running the show, and you
Yeah.
think, oh, you're going to
Yeah.
be sorry. Because
Yeah.
as a former teacher, and of course, mom, I'm thinking like, oh boy, they think, I don't know what they're thinking, maybe being their child's friend or something.
Yeah,
It's,
right.
horrendous, but,
Did it strike you as interesting, considering a lot of you that are in front of the cameras right now have degrees in education and a little bit of psychology? Did it strike you as interesting that the Elder Thaddeus talking about how a child is largely defined by 5 years old as something that is very...
For 20 years ago, I said that. And today, I'm sorry, Father. Forgive me. Go ahead.
No, but that is something that has been a truism. Now, granted, psychologists will say that you are developing until you die, but by and large, who you are as a person is, they say, largely cemented by 6 years old. And this is a very powerful notion that we really need to work on having obedience and order in a child's life, especially up to 5 years old. But what's interesting is not just that, because if you go to ethnic households, there's the idea of order, but the concept of what that order means is a completely different thing. And I think that's where Pat was getting at the idea that to do this with love is different. And what does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
Well, that you should scold your child in anger, but in love, so they're not afraid of you.
And yet you do have to be willing to scold them when it's needed. Because
Right.
he also talks about, spoiling the child who gets whatever he wants. And, that's not the way to do it either.
Right,
This
because I
was
like
the
the issue where he talks about the child that kept going to the grandparents, and they
Oh,
kept
yeah.
yeah, the mom was giving him everything, every toy, every electronic device,
Right.
everything, and still the child wanted to be with the grandparents.
Right.
right, because the child recognized that there was no love. But keep in mind, what did that in your vignette, Mom, that Mrs. Tobias, in the vignette that you are looking at, what was the issue? It wasn't the issue of just giving the child everything. What was the problem with that particular vignette, where the boy wanted only to be with the grandparents?
The parents had trouble in their marriage.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
was
Exactly.
friction between them, and he picked up on it.
Exactly. It was the idea that children are spiritual sponges and they see
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And so the issue wasn't just because, I mean, obviously the issue of giving your child everything is a problem. He mentioned that in other ones. But this particular one was important because they were destroying their relationship and allowing their thoughts, their lustful thoughts, to go to other people and have an issue. And to me,
even
when I
though
look
they
at,
act on it, it still, went out, I guess.
well, keep in mind, how old was the boy?
How old was the boy?
Yeah, do you remember?
I think what's he, 5?
Yeah, something like that, I think. Yeah.
Little,
Like 5 or 7. Well,
right.
this means that they'd probably been married for about how long?
Well, it's assumed 7 or 8 years, maybe.
Well, let's say 7 years.
Yeah.
So there's a famous Marilyn Monroe movie called what?
The 7-year
itch.
itch.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's it about?
Well, she goes away, and the husband is home by his alone, and he's thinking
Wanderlust in the marriage.
Exactly. And so this is unfortunately, and this is one of the things that I preach a lot in my premarital counseling, is to why it's so important to work on your marriages, because what is happening around 7 years old, especially when there's a child in the mix, is that one or the other, or both, as in the case of this vignette, is feeling that the spouse does not care for that person, does not feel that that person is special or worth talking to or having a deep relationship. And so invariably that person starts seeking that kind of gratification and fulfillment elsewhere. And so even if they had never done it, physically, which, Elder Thaddeus said, thank God you did not get to that point yet.
Yeah.
But even though they had not done that, still their thoughts on that subject had already given into it. And that effect was destructive and destroying not only the relationship with each other, but making an environment so toxic that little boy wanted nothing to do with it. He wanted away from it.
And I felt, do you think that he felt like he wasn't loved, like he wasn't, the center of their attention anymore?
Yeah, right.
His grandparents were giving him that love.
No, it had nothing to do with that. It had to do everything with the fact that he was in a place that was very, very toxic. He was in a place where it wasn't that he didn't feel loved. That that's what they came to him saying, to Elder Thaddeus saying, what's going on? We give him everything. Well, that's problematic in and of itself. He doesn't want things.
Yeah.
He wants you. And he doesn't just want you. He wants the you that was when you got married, that loved each other and was there for each other and, was praying together and an actual marriage. So this is the crux there, that it has to be a holistic household. It's not just the idea of disciplining the children. It's the idea of a holistic, prayerful home. So that was a good one. Dr. Tobias will come back to you. Maria Canella?
Have you found it?
Yeah, no.
Number 18 was the one about the parents' thoughts that killed their son.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
That one, I was like, oh my goodness. Because I think a lot of times, whether people are being serious or not, they're like, oh, I could just kill him, or,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
this actually killed the son. So I guess what was it in this mother's words that said this versus somebody saying, oh, I could kill him because they're angry, but I mean the person,
Doesn't mean it.
Because Maria Canella, there's a difference between a momentary wrath, like, oh, I'm gonna kill him, versus genuine wrath. Like, where you continuously try to reconcile and there's just no reconciliation. It's like, he's not my son anymore. He's not even my son anymore. He's dead to me. He's dead to me. He's dead to me. And so God said, all right, fine. Then he's dead to you.
So she really meant it, though? Surely she didn't really mean it.
She meant in the sense of dead to me. Now, granted, I'm extrapolating because obviously I can't speak for this woman, but I never want to see him again. This person's dead to me. And so she cut her heart off to say, I don't care anymore. I don't love this person anymore.
Well, she said something. She said something like, I don't want to see. I only want to see is what, dead.
I do not want to set eyes on him alive.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
That's whoa.
So it
Yeah.
was a curse. She enacted a curse on her own child.
Yeah, but as a mother, I think, like, how would you ever say that about your child ever? I mean,
Never.
yeah,
Never.
never. I mean, you think, like, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And-
it does happen in a lot of contexts.
Yeah, your
You know.
child marries the wrong person, and you say, that's it, he's dead to me, I don't accept. Which is another point that Thaddeus makes, how the children have to, with respect for your parents, and
yeah.
let them choose
I'll
you.
just say on some of my other kids, my other sons, I prayed a lot, and God answers prayers. Is all I can say. Because they were dating some girl, not father. Father was perfect, but I
Yeah.
mean, it was like they were dating these. I was like,
Right.
and I just prayed, and for one of them, I think it was years. And then you know what? There you go. And then it's like God sent someone who was very prayerful and perfect. So
Great.
Well, there has to be peace. There has to be peace in a relationship, which means that it can't be this, us versus them. We're against the world. The idea is that if we are having a holistic, prayerful relationship with Christ, that includes with our parents on both sides. And whether that's Orthodox or non-Orthodox, it's very, very important that there is a familial tie there. Because if it becomes one or the other, then it can become very destructive. It becomes a tug of war. It's not good. And so the idea that that the marriages have to be within the scope of obedience to the parents is important. It has to be blessed in that context.
Yeah, the thing that struck me at the end of that, I guess he was trying to make a point, but then he didn't go on to say, he didn't give her any comfort or anything. She just says, you yourself killed your son, I told her.
Yeah.
Those thoughts are very
that's like,
powerful.
wow.
You said that you did not wish to see him alive, and that's what happened. Boom. I mean, slapped you in the face.
Yeah.
You're going to hell.
Well,
I mean,
he didn't say that. Keep in mind.
but I mean, that's what it implies here.
Well, it doesn't imply that, Dad. What it implies, Dr. Tobias, what this happened, the reason why God allowed this to happen is, first of all, we don't know the state of the condition of her son. He could be in paradise. We don't know when God is going to take us, essentially. But by allowing her, this woman, to understand that she herself killed her son, to understand that she has to deal with the concept of she committed murder against her child. Now, obviously, you look at that and say, okay, well, now she's going to despair. But will she? Obviously, Elder Thaddeus is a very saintly person. He's not just like, well, you done screwed up and sorry. He's going to try to help her. Whether she, takes that help or not, to help her out of that despair is another thing entirely. But this could be her rock bottom where she bounces back. Sometimes God allows us to go through things that we think to ourselves, there's no way I could go through that. But it's all because he knows that the only way for you to get to salvation is to go through that. There's no other way.
Also, Father, I assume that they're not gonna. He can't write every little thing that I assume that he went on and gave her advice from there. I mean, maybe I'm extrapolating, but I assume that he would not just leave it at that.
Right. I mean, that is to be assumed. But what's important for us is to take from what he's giving us to say, this is important.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, especially as a parent, can have catastrophic consequences. And so it's very, very important that we are cognizant of what our thoughts do and how we relate to our children, to always be that beacon of hope and peace. All right, Tobias's and Copra's, are you set for this? Can we go to the Coles? Okay.
All right. I was interested in, well, really two things. The mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship, how he, focused in on that and saw that as a common source of conflict. Um, and, how to deal with that. And the idea that the wife should obey the husband.
Which specific one is that one? That
Okay.
the wife should obey the husband.
I'm looking for that one. The mother-in-law, daughter-in-law is number 7.
Right. I'm prepared to talk about that one, but the wife must obey the husband. I'm trying to find.
I think it was toward the end.
Okay, number 13. Often there's no unity or oneness of mind in our families because wives and mothers transgress the commandment of obedience to their husbands.
Now, keep in mind that when he's speaking about these sort of things, he's speaking in the high theological sense. And so when we look at obedience to our husbands, it doesn't mean this concept of the husband is dictator in the household. It is the idea that the husband is the head and the wife is the body. And so the body follows where the head goes. Now, it could be in this case that I'm just extrapolating, but like, let's say that the husband is, has to take a job, let's say in San Francisco. And the wife says, no, we're going to Colorado. I've decided that. Even though the husband's job is, critical to the family. They need to be one mind, unified, talking together, coming to decisions together. Ultimately, within the church, we look at the husband as a tiebreaker, but the reality is that it's supposed to be king and queen of a kingdom, meaning that you two work together to come to conclusions and decisions. And it's only when you say, okay, well, we have to have a decision tiebreaker, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
If that's not being done, I mean, keep in mind, it can go into a range that is not healthy and not good. If a husband is looking at his role as, well, my role is to be the head of the household, which means that they got to do what I say. That's not holistic. That's not what Christ did. When it says that Christ is the husband is to Christ as the wife is to the church. Christ gave himself for the church. He died for the church. Didn't just die for the church. Was brutalized, tortured, scourged, fasted, went into the desert for 40 days, endured the scourging and the mocking of men, all for his beloved. If your husband is willing to do all that for you, with you as the sole reason he's doing it, yeah, chances are you're probably going to follow him if he has to go somewhere.
Yes.
That is the context of that obedience. And what sometimes happens is households end up going in completely different directions because instead of being of one mind and one plan and one goal, they have their own goals. And sometimes those goals coincide, but a lot of times they're just kind of going wherever they want. And that's what we're seeing a lot in today's society too, is
Absolutely.
that couples are not unified on a single goal, this is one of the things that I start off my marriage counseling classes. I always ask, what's the goal of marriage? Oh, okay, maybe to get a family. Okay, cool, you get kids. Then what? Get a house? Cool, then what? Plan for retirement? Great, you got retirement. Then what? Maybe see our kids married? Oh, that's wonderful. Then what? Well, what do you mean, then what? The goal of marriage is to walk arm in arm to salvation. That's the goal. Everything you do needs to be working towards that goal. Otherwise, what are you doing? And so what we're seeing a lot of times in couples is they don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they're going or what they want to do. They know that they have feelings for each other, but they don't know how to express that appropriately. And so this can be problematic. But let's get back to Pat, what you said as your first one is the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law trope, which is very, very common. And the reality is that what we're seeing is two individuals that are not able to see their identities. And it takes humility on both parts, as he shows us, to establish that. So the one is the mother-in-law realizing that she needs to see the daughter-in-law as her actual daughter, to see that, this is somebody that I need to love, even if she doesn't respect me, even if she isn't treating me the way I want to, even though she's taken my son from me, to love her regardless, pray for her, and pray that God enlighten her, God be with her, but to not allow her to keep us separate, to make sure that God allows there to be space, make sure that my daughter-in-law does not forget me, was a powerful thing that he said. And by the same virtue, for the daughter-in-law to recognize her mother-in-law as her actual mother, to have that same love, that same kind of connection, that connectivity.
Father, does that take a long time though? I mean, like, obviously not with Presidenta, but let's say, I'm not gonna say who, but let's say it takes a long time. Like, I feel like all my daughters are my daughters, but I don't know necessarily if they really feel like I'm their mother as well.
This is something that is going to be, person to person, time to time, but relationships take time. Relationships build over time. And this only happens, as Elder Thaddeus is showing us, within prayer. To actually pray for that person as your daughter, to actually pray for that person as your mother, to have that legitimate feeling within inside you. The relationship itself is going to take time. And he says it takes time. This is not an overnight thing. This is something that is going to happen. He says this is common. But to understand that when you are thinking negative thoughts about your daughter-in-law, you are actually beating her, that you are causing harm. And so you would need to look at that child as the child that you love, that you gave your blessing to be into your family. Now, that doesn't mean to take abuse. That doesn't mean to allow things to be. But we also see that from another place within this, that oftentimes when children come to adults, because they were given too much as children, then they continue taking out that issue as they're older. One of the ones that I found very interesting was the story of the young man that had wrecked 3 cars and wanted another car. Because his parents had given him everything. And so he became entitled. Well, it doesn't matter that they can't afford it. They're going to give me another car.
Well, he makes the point about it. He says, well, when he was little, it was just small things he wanted. But then as he got older, the things he wanted were bigger.
Right.
And he stole from the parents.
Right. And what that course of that is, of course, you didn't teach the child appreciation. You didn't teach the child of why this was good or why this was bad. These are all very important elements.
Back to 5 years old.
What was that?
Yeah.
So back to 5 years old.
Yeah.
From 5 years old, we need to teach obedience, but love. The idea that never to beat a child. I mean, sometimes spankings are necessary, but it should never be the first resort. And second of all, if it's ever done with malice or revenge, that's abuse.
Yeah.
And that goes with any kind of discipline, whether it's verbal, mental, or even with your thoughts with your child. This is one of the reasons why I like the tandemness of our thoughts determine our lives with Wounded by Love, because St. Porphyrios, speaking of this, talks about even our thoughts when the child is in the womb are important, because that child feels that. It understands the prayers that the mother and the father are having for the child, and how even that parenting basically begins from that moment, and why it's so important that we have a loving relationship, husband and wife, for that child.
It's interesting, Father, because these holy men and women too, I mean, they had these thoughts, they knew these things, and now modern psychology tells you, oh, you should play music because your child hears it in the
Right.
womb.
In utero learning, right,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, and yet all of these holy, they knew this,
Right.
I mean,
Yes, and what's amazing to me is that because Saint Porphyrios and Elder Thaddeus, what do we notice that neither of them have?
children, yeah,
Yeah,
I know,
right.
I know, and I know, and it's interesting that people would say stuff like, oh, well, if you don't have children, if you don't know, but they did.
Well, they had spiritual children.
Correct.
They had all of these people who were coming to them all the time, both the parent, sometimes the parents, and sometimes the children, and I'm sure that they, that in this case, Elder Thaddeus learned from them as well as imparting knowledge.
And what's
to
amazing to me, Steve, is that not only was it about the idea of how to parent for him, but what was more important was how he saw how couples needed to react and relate to each other.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he does not have a wife, he understands the principles of marriage at its core to be able to help people. So these two were very, very good. The section on thoughts and the section on family life.
Yeah.
Really great.
So
Really
I'm
good.
very much looking forward to our next two sections. And I hope that it will also engender a lot more conversation. So we're going to close with our last 10 minutes with answering any questions that we have on today's reading or on our first class when we talked about the life of Elder Thaddeus. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns, or comments?
I do have one question. It says it's a mistake to punish children as soon as they do something wrong. But I always thought, if you wait, how is he going to remember that they did something wrong?
Well, I think it means in anger.
I think that's what exactly that, Dr. Tobias. I think he's speaking that you see the child's done something and you are reacting in anger. Whereas
because I was wondering, because I'm thinking, okay, so the child is doing something and he shouldn't be doing it. Maybe it might cause him harm, or he might break something, he might hurt himself. And you say, no, don't do that. But
there's a difference between disciplining. In other words, disciplining means he's not saying, don't smack the child right then and there. He's saying, stop the child, but don't immediately, start lecturing the child. Be prayerful, be composed.
Okay.
Then
get control of yourself first.
Correct.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking like little kids. I mean, they're doing something. I'm like, you're gonna be told right off.
But human beings are not dogs. You don't rub their noses in it to discipline them. We are rational beings.
Dog training doesn't believe in that either.
Thank God. But that was the misconception, is this idea of, I've got to show them right now. It's like, no.
Calm down first.
Calm down.
Yeah.
Stop the immediate harm and then.
Well, yeah, because you're touching something and it's like,
You remove the child from harm, of course.
Yes.
But everything else is.
I'm going to say, don't do that. Stop.
So let me reflect on my favorite part before I get to your other questions. My favorite part was talking about how if one person in the household achieves peace, everyone in the household can have peace. Which means that you, as the individual, for your own individual homes, need to try to be that individual of peace. Because everyone has issues. Everyone has relationship problems. Everyone has something going on. But if you can strive to be that person of peace by the grace of God, then that is what is ultimately going to help your partner. That is what is going to help that person at work. That is going to help that child. If you can become that person of peace, to maintain the peace of God, and to think those positive thoughts, that is what's going to help people.
Well, you contrast that. I think it was in point number 15 or 16. He was talking about, if one person in the family is overly stressed, and I mean, is worried about something, and you could just imagine, we've all faced that situation where we've had, bad, a period at work or something like that. So maybe outside of the house that's causing this stress.
And yet the effects of it, I'm sure you've experienced it, Steve, as head of your house, and I've experienced it in my household, is that when you are stressed or anxious or depressed or what have you, it affects everyone in the house.
Absolutely.
And vice versa. It doesn't have to just come from the so-called head of the household. It can be anyone in the household if they're going through a period, and even the child. If the child is having those kinds of things, it affects everybody.
Right,
So,
but for the heads, and by head I mean like the parents together.
Yeah.
If they can be erimos, if they can be peace, then even though that child is feeling that anxiety and that stress, then that bastion of comfort and stability can
Right.
help nullify that child's stress and anxiety. And so that's why it's so critical for the people at the top to basically have that effect on the rest of the household, because when you don't, it tears the whole thing down.
And conversely, if one of the parents is going through a stressful period, and if the other person can be that center of peace, that's gonna help. The problem is when both are having those periods at the same time.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, we have to understand in spiritual warfare that we're dealing with an insidious enemy that waits for opportune moments. And so it's never just as simple as, well, you're gonna have a bad day, and then she's gonna have a bad day, and then you're gonna have a bad day, and she's gonna have a bad day. It's like he waits. Gonna wait till you both have had a stress on both sides, and then say, okay, now I'm gonna attack him with X.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important for us to be vigilant, hyper vigilant, to not allow those negative bad days to happen. Because if we can allow ourselves to get to the point of spirituality where he's talking about, then ultimately somebody says something mean to you, don't care. Someone gets promoted ahead of you, don't care. This is what Jesus Christ was saying when he said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And I think we talked about this before, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows what the word meek means? Good.
What?
Find it.
What?
All right, so Pat, if you had to describe the word meek, how would you describe it?
Well, I tend to think of it as timid, but I'm sure that's not what he means.
You would be correct that people think that meek means timid.
Timid. Yeah.
But keep in mind, in the Beatitudes, every single one of the Beatitudes is a quality of Christ. Does Christ strike you as timid?
Absolutely not. So what? Absolutely
It's
not.
fearless.
So no, Christ is not timid, but Christ is meek.
How
Meek,
should we understand meek
Is
then?
it more towards quiet?
No.
meek means somebody that is not affected by positive or negative.
Ah,
In other words, someone that is meek is somebody that is not affected by praise. You cannot buy someone that is meek. Someone that is meek is not affected by abuse. You cannot bully someone that is meek. And so if you cannot be pushed by positives or negatives, then who's in control? You are.
you are.
And if you are the one in control, then can anything in the world stop you?
No.
No. Hence, the meek shall inherit the earth.
But
Wow.
everybody thinks the opposite of meek. If you ask
Right.
anyone, most they're not going to know that that's what it means.
Right.
So
Well,
meek-
thanks for clarifying that, Father, because I
But
didn't
that's
know
the
that.
goal. If we can become meek, if we can become unaffected by the world and everything in it, then we can always be that positive beacon to our family. We can always be, a sign of hope for people around us. And that's only found in Christ. Any other thoughts on our final couple of minutes?
I wrote one of the notes on, it's actually on page 72 and goes into 73. about the pious man who had achieved peace, but then he was being physically attacked by Satan. I
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
he was trying to tell his friends to be pious too. Like, what? I'm not understanding what happened to him. Like, how he had peace and then all of a sudden he's being attacked by demons.
So because he basically decided to go out into the world and watch movies, and by movies I think he means like racy movies.
Okay.
He allowed himself basically to be under assault, spiritual assault, and so that's why Elder Thaddeus said this is why people that either be married or be super chaste, but you got to be careful. You've got to be vigilant. You cannot give in to these kind of things. And the fact that he was able to be physically assaulted by demons, like actually physically assaulted, means that this man's prayer life was such that the demons were taking it to the next stage.
So they could literally like hit him and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
bruises.
Yeah, most people are never going to experience that. Most people are never going to experience that kind of physicality from the evil one. It is only for people that have reached that certain plateau that they are able to endure that and beat that. But that's only because God knows that that person can do this. So that person, clearly that person was being groomed for monastic life. And why he was basically telling all of his friends to be chaste, and why he was saying, I don't want to get married, I don't need to get married. People are trying to force me to get married, and so basically he was gearing himself for that kind of life, and so that's why he was able to go through those certain things. Does that make sense, Maria Canal?
Yeah, because it just I was confused as to why it was happening to him. But that makes sense.
Right. So
He's the one who's
the-
that big guy, 220 pounds or something.
Yeah.
He was 220 or something.
For
Yeah.
20.
So where she's looking at is he tells them to either live in chastity or get married. He talks to them about chastity of Christian life so much so that I had to tell him to tone it down a little. When a person attempts to pull another person away from evil deeds, then the demons attack him relentlessly. And attack him they did. He fought many spiritual battles, and the demons physically attacked him. He would come to me all bruised and beaten. It was unbelievable. So in other words, what Elder Thaddeus is talking about in this particular instance is that when you're taking the food away from a rabid dog, what is that dog going to do to you?
Like,
It's going to bite you. It's going to try to attack you. And so when you are taking the prey of demons away from them, they're going to assault you. They're going to attack you. As a priest, I've experienced this numerous times where if I have a very fruitful confession, then I will be under assault for days, spiritually, just dealing with like thoughts, because the evil one is very upset that that person had their epiphany, whatever they had to go through, and they got through it, and they know that it was because they went to the priest. And so if you are helping somebody get out of that, then yeah, you are going to get attacked. And so that's why he was saying, tone it down just a little bit. Make sure that you are strong enough to deal with it yourself. And so that's why this individual went through those things, because God was gearing him up for this. But that's the nature of the beast.
Father, I think you told me about a priest that got attacked by the demons actually behind the altar. And I was sort of shocked when you told me that, because I always thought, and I can't remember who it was, but I always thought like the evil one couldn't be there.
Oh, sure he can. You don't think that the priest is under assault by thoughts when he's trying to do the mystical services?
But I'm pretty sure it was you who told me about a priest that was praying and got assaulted.
Yes, this person, and he'll be canonized soon enough. I think he's Romanian in America, but he was physically assaulted by demons, and then it was even has the scars to show it before he died. But anyway, this is a monk that would periodically float like 2 feet off the ground because he was so pious. And then there was another story later in his life where the demons tried to attack him again, and he took his Bible, because it came in the form of a bat with like spikes on its wings, and the monk just took a Bible and just smacked it and said, "Get out of here," because at that point it had no power over him. But the reality, Mom, though, is that yes, demons can come into the church. That it's anyone that's actually tried to pray in church knows you're fighting to pray in church.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But I never realized until now at this meeting that that was the evil one trying to distract you from what you were doing. I just thought it's like just like in Wounded by Love. What did he call them? Those thoughts that come around.
Logis me.
Bat them away. He said,
Logis me, and that.
Logis me. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's me.
Yeah.
Well, like for example, as a priest, you know, you're praying, you're trying to do the morning prayers in the Orthros, and suddenly you're thinking, oh, did I remember to put this in the bulletin? Did I remember to do this? Did I remember to do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, stuff like
And
that.
it's
Yeah.
like it's not like insidious. It's not like you're thinking like murderous or dark evil thoughts. It's
yeah.
he's
Stuff-
trying to distract you from the task at hand. That's how he fights.
It's good to know because then we could be aware when these thoughts come. And like what he said about the Lord used me to just bat it away. I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but this is one of the reasons why it's important that we pray for each other, and especially why, you know, we always encourage people, pray for your priest. Your priest needs your prayers too. Because in those moments, he's praying for you.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, everyone, I'm glad that we had a wonderful, fruitful class for first two chapters of thoughts and family life. Next time on serving others and humility will be also a lot of fun. So look forward to everybody's thoughts next week. I pray everyone has a great and wonderful week. And for those that are in the Chicagoland area, we hope that you'll enjoy